Will Cole, welcome to the show, man.
Jimmy Song, glad to be here.
How's everything going?
Things are good. South by in Austin. It's a little bit busy traffic-wise, everything like that, but
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah, what about the set, man? Like, I mean, we're at the Unchained Capital offices, and this is, I haven't seen this before, and I literally just saw this like 10 minutes before, and we were just talking about it. Wow, like, how did this happen? How did we get such a nice studio? What's going on here, man?
Yeah, I mean, so technically we're not in the Unchained offices right now. We're in the Bitcoin Commons, and it's a very different thing, but specifically where we are right now is, this was the dream child of Marty Bent, and getting his perfect podcast set up here as part of the Bitcoin Commons. But yeah, I mean, we moved offices at Unchained Capital, in January, I want to say. We found this beautiful building in downtown Austin. It was really important for us to find something that fit the character of the type of company that we wanted to build, something that was solid, something that had history, something that was native to Austin, and not some glass monstrosity that's been built in the last 5 years that, we'll let Facebook have those places. So we found this place at 6th and Congress, center of the town. We got the entire floor here, and with part of it, we had a vision for building a space for Bitcoiners, of which, part of the space for Bitcoiners was supposed to be a nice studio where people coming in and out of Austin, where you and Marty and everyone else could really, do your thing. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely get to Bitcoin Commons.
Yeah,
all the stuff that's it. But let's start with your background, because a lot of people don't know who you are. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got into Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I'm Will Cole. I am a product manager by training. I work here at Unchained Capital on the product and design side. I've been a Bitcoiner for a long time. I think technically over a decade now, which is kind of fun. My background was in product and engineering. I grew up in a family of engineers, and rebelling in my family was not being an engineer. My dad, my uncle, my brother, like everyone. And then I found out about this world of product management, and I really, I worked on startups when I was younger, fresh out of school. And then when I went to Stack Overflow, I really wanted to learn under Joel Spolsky, who was, at least at the time, even still today, the most prolific writer and the best writer about, product development process and being a product leader. And so I was a part of Stack Overflow from 2012 until 2019. Yeah, learning the ins and outs there.
Well, so what made you get into product development? Because that to me is, I don't know, I'm an engineer, right? So I'm the guy that works with people like you to, go build stuff. What made you want to do that in particular? And what got you to understand that you have a talent for it? What was that like?
Yeah. So I think part of it was, I'd been programming as a kid. I wrote, BASIC. I learned early web development tools, some JavaScript and HTML and all that stuff. I didn't particularly like it. I didn't like being an engineer. I don't think I think like an engineer. But once I sort of found out that there was a way to be involved in the development of web products in particular, is what I was focused on, but you didn't have to be an engineer, that was very exciting for me, because I wanted to be involved, but I didn't want to be the person writing code. However, finding out that I was good at it was kind of a long process. You don't know if you're good at it, especially when you're like 23 and you have to build credibility with a bunch of programmers. Like it's kind of hard, but given my background of how I grew up and what I had studied and all those types of things, I found that I fit the mold of a product manager even before I knew there was a title of product manager. That I could communicate well with engineers. I knew how to get requirements to them in a way that they understood. I could commiserate with them when things were insane and requirements were changing from stakeholders all around. And I found that I developed sort of this idea that In product development, if you don't have engineers, you can't build anything. If you don't have designers, it's going to look like crap. If you don't have salespeople, no one's going to buy it. If you don't have a product manager, you can still do all those things. Like that, our job is to make all those things work better, right? And if you are a good communicator, if you're a good writer, and if you have enough technical knowledge to be credible with engineers, you can have an immense sort of impact on the value that you can deliver to customers. You can actually create value without writing code. And I found a way to create value without writing code.
Well, so I imagine a lot of people listening to this podcast or watching us on YouTube, they are interested in getting into the Bitcoin space. So, this sounds. I'm sure all of the stuff that you're saying, they're nodding along and saying, "Oh yeah, I love being in the technical side, but I'm not really a coder. I don't really enjoy coding." Why don't you tell us your story of how you got into that role and what advice you might have for people that are seeking to get in those roles?
Sure. I kind of pretended at first. I gave myself the job because I was doing startups. I did 2 startups before I had like a real job where I got to do whatever I wanted. And so I played the role of a product founder of 2 different startups. And I learned a lot. Mostly what I was reading back then were, early stuff from Jeff Patton, from Joel Spolsky, from Ryan Singer at Basecamp, and I was sort of learning on the fly, which is really a good way to learn about product development, is just to do it, right? Most product development books or product management books suck. They're not very good. There's a million agile development books that teach you how to be a scrum master, but when you're actually building software, nothing goes by the book. And so I like to tell product managers that are younger is that you want to be like the handyman that shows up to your house, where you can say, that light fixture doesn't work, and that toilet's broken, and this HVAC system isn't working. And the handyman has this tool set, and he can fix your light, and he can fix your toilet, and he can fix your HVAC system. You have to be multidisciplinary. And usually just reading these same books about agile development or, StageGate or whatever it is, isn't going to make you a multidisciplinary, type of person that can rise to the challenges that come with building software. So I found that just doing it and really just giving myself the job was really important. But I also found a voice, like a perspective, and I became opinionated about the right way to build software. And a lot of it came from being flexible. Knowing my role in it was not to dictate things to engineers necessarily, but to find out how to get the most out of an engineering team or an individual. And a lot of that came from working with Joel and spending a lot of time in a more formal setting as a product manager at Stack Overflow, building a product that I was immensely proud of and passionate about, but also learning from people that had been around the block. Joel had built Excel at Microsoft, it doesn't get much bigger than building those types of products. And it taught me a lot. And then I got to find my own voice there. I got to hire a team. I got to build new products without his oversight. Really it was about just, it's kind of like, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. It was just spending enough time in seeing enough scenarios of how things can go wrong, taught me the tool set that I needed to make sure things normally go right.
Well, so what are some of those things that, if you are trying to get into this industry, and I know lots of younger people that maybe aren't really, they Sure. realize they're not like the rock star coder, but they have enough technical chops to, speak credibly to engineers, for example. Like what advice do you have for them to get better at that without necessarily like having to go to a startup and like giving themselves that role? Like where can they get some practical experience on that? Because with engineers, it's pretty simple. You go and contribute to an open source project or something like that. There are many paths to being a good engineer. What's the path to becoming a good product manager?
Yeah, I think, building up that credibility it isn't as easy as just having written code before. You have to kind of experience what engineers go through. So for me, the startup thing was not just giving myself the job. It was finding an engineer to work with because they could make things happen that I couldn't, right? And learning the ins and outs of what was going to make them successful. And so if you're trying to get into it, like one is the best thing you can possibly do is get hired as a associate PM. The big companies, the Microsofts and Googles and Apples of the world have these sort of associate type programs, or join a startup where they have these sort of jack of all trades roles where they need someone who can, both, organize a Jira board, right? And like, bring order to chaos, right? And they also need someone to pick up breakfast tacos in the morning, right? And you can kind of do everything and you can slip in. I find that, there's a lot of different like paths to this. And I would say the most obvious the most successful paths that I've seen personally are people that just do sort of the jack of all trades startup thing and just get a lot of broad experience where they can take that experience to product development in a more controlled way and add value, where they've gone through one of these associate programs, or, if they're absolutely obsessed with the domain that they're going in and therefore they're at an information advantage than anyone else working there. And so if you're at an information advantage, then you should be dictating what gets built. You should be dictating what customers want. And a lot of that just comes with obsession. But the practical skills you need are, you need to be able to communicate, right? Both written and with words, right? In a very clear way, and you have to be high energy. Like no low energy people are going to be good product managers. You need to keep forward momentum at any given time, even on the dullest projects that you're working on.
And that is something that I've noticed about like the really good product managers, is that they can just sort of move things forward. They're always sort of like, okay, where are we stuck? And they go figure it out, and maybe get a decision from a VP, or like, we need this widget defined by a designer or whatever, and they just make sure that everyone is constantly moving. They're kind of the cat herder or something, right? Like just sort of making everything happen.
Sure. I mean, like it really depends on the the construct of the team that you're working on, but there's certainly, I'm going to mix up quotes all over the place during this, and I don't know who said this, but this idea that a bad decision is better than no decision, right? Or that stagnation is the enemy, right? That's what you're fighting against. Or I think it was Phil Knight at Nike that was just like, grow or die, right? Forward momentum, especially in software projects, like you can lose everything by just second guessing yourself, by doubting yourself, by analysis by paralysis by analysis type situations where the real thing you need to do is get software into users' hands and then see what happens, right? You can always make it better, right? You have to have the viable, the V, in MVP, but really the goal should be get software in people's hands and then move from there. And you need constant forward momentum, constant energy in order to make that happen, because there's a million reasons not to do things. There's a million reasons to overanalyze things. There's a million reasons to over-architect things. And you need someone who has a sense of proportion that can motivate and keep that moving forward.
Well, so you've been doing this role for a while. What are some things that you learned from Joel when you were at Stack that have had an impact in your career as a product manager?
Oh, geez, so many things. One was becoming a better writer. Joel's a phenomenal writer, and it's a way a product manager can scale themselves. I wasn't a particularly good writer when I went into Stack Overflow. And there are really small things that you can do that make working on a project better. Like I tell jokes in my specs, for instance, because if you write a 7-page spec and it's just boring to read, like, oh my God, it's just a nightmare for an engineer to go through this. And it seems terrible, right? You can make it engaging. You can be a good writer and write something that is serious at the same time that needs to be followed, to the spec, right? So the focus on enhancing my abilities as a writer to feel confident in being playful, even in a serious document, to make sure that it was engaging and that people would remember what I wrote and that random things weren't being built. So that was like the first thing, is that he was such a good writer that it really caused me to realize that I needed to up my game. But it also meant that I could scale myself, that I was a good speaker. I was persuasive. I could argue well. But that's a retail way of communicating.
Yeah, that doesn't scale very well.
Yeah, the wholesale way of communicating is write a doc and get 15 people to agree, right? So that was the first thing, was just really upping my game there. The other one, though, was just being opinionated, right? Is not in the way that I think a lot of people will take this. Being opinionated meant that for me was I knew that there were 15 different ways that this project could go successfully, right? And there wasn't one methodology and there wasn't one silver bullet. My opinionated part of it was that above the product, the methodology that you use, that you find the primitives of software development, that these things are always true when something goes well, and you weren't just lucky, right? If you were good on purpose, there are only a few things that you need to do really well, right? And you do those every single time, and it doesn't matter what methodology you use underneath, right? You have a good strategy. You know what you want to do, right? People that walk into projects with no strategy fail more often than they succeed, right? That you have a defined process for discovering requirements, right? You know how to talk to customers, you know how to analyze data, you know how to trust your own intuition if you're obsessed with the domain, but you can discover requirements in a repeatable way, right? That you have a way of testing these assumptions, right? And that you know how to keep forward momentum going when things inevitably go wrong when you start writing code, right? And then lastly, you know how to tell the world what you did. Okay, well, so there's like 5 things there, right? You have a good strategy, you have a good discovery process, you know how to build things, and interact with engineers, you know how to test things, right? And you know how to get the word out, right? Well, that's not a methodology, right? But you can use those primitives in any of the methodologies. If you just do those 5 things consistently, any of the methodologies are going to work. So that was where I became opinionated at a more abstract level than just like, oh, well, I'm a Scrum Master and I do Agile this way, and you can only do Kanban boards this way, or, all that is just fluff. If you get those 5 things right, you can build good software consistently.
Sounds like a book you need to write, man. The principles behind the actual processes is, I think, what you're getting at here.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think that, the thing that I see where people struggle the most is at the very beginning. Not a lot of people actually know what they want to build. They think that like some vague idea is enough, right? I think Jeff Patton wrote this back in like 2008. He has a blog. The title is it's a Sex Pistols quote. It's don't know what I want, but I know how to get it. And he has this famous picture of the Mona Lisa where one person's thinking of the Mona Lisa, and it says, a woman in a pastoral setting, right? He's imagining a woman in a pastoral setting, but you don't have the Mona Lisa there. You're still trying to figure it out. And that's the process of iteration, right? Where you're iterating because you don't know what you want yet, right? And then there's another person who just has a picture of the Mona Lisa in their head, right? And that's an incremental way of building. It's like, well, okay, I can do this part of the painting over here. I can do this part over here, but you have a full vision of what you want. Very few people have a full vision of what they want when they start, and they misrepresent what iteration actually looks like. They don't even have the woman in the pastoral setting idea when they start to write code. That's a really bad time to start writing code.
Yeah, I could imagine. And in what ways do you end up screwing up as a result of that?
I mean, it's all a failure in strategy always ends in tragedy, right? Like you can't get good results. I mean, maybe you get lucky, right? But the end results are usually you never finish because you never know what you wanted in the first part. You build something that no one wants, so you've wasted everyone's time. Or you break all the relationships and credibility that you have with fellow team members, right? And even knowing all these things, those are still at risk. You can do everything right and it can still go wrong. But your chances of things going correct, or going wrong, are very high when you don't know what you want. It reminds me of a lot of altcoin projects, right? People come in with these like lazy ideas of like what money is and where value is or why Bitcoin's valuable.
Like world computer.
Yeah, it's too fluffy, right? that's not tangible enough to build something off of, apparently.
All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. You've been in the product management space for a long time. How do you see Bitcoin and what it's trying to do? Because we talked a little bit about altcoins and their sort of lack of vision or lack of definition around what they want. When you're looking at Bitcoin, what do you see?
I want to answer this with a little bit of a story.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So early on, let's call it 2012 through 2018, I had a very perverse view of like where I could add value in the Bitcoin world, which was basically that I couldn't, right? I looked at it mostly from the core protocol layer, and I didn't see the core protocol layer needing someone with my skill set, right? And then I looked at like, what are the products out there? It's like, well, they're all exchanges, and I'm not that interested in building an exchange. I mean, they're fine, don't get me wrong, like it's all fine, but it wasn't very motivating to me. So I just looked at Bitcoin as an investor, right? And someone who admired it and who understood from an economic standpoint, that had some technical knowledge of how it worked, especially due to meeting you and other people, right? But I didn't know how I could create value. And it was really, one of my good friends, Parker Lewis, that was like, well, again, I'm going to butcher the quote, but if Bitcoin's money, what's the product of money? And I was like, I don't know, exchanges. And it all looks kind of boring. He's like, no, it's financial services, right? And for that, you have to build software, and you need software teams, and you need people like you that can add value, right? And so for me, Bitcoin starting out, my view of it was very much, from I got a terrible economics education in school, like a classic Keynesian education, but I was in the technical world, and I was learning about Austrian economics, in post QE. And so I looked at it and I saw value. I just didn't see where I added value, right? Or where someone who wasn't writing code would add value. Because honestly, like for the first several years, unless you were shilling Bitcoin on YouTube, like unless you were Trace Mayer saying, buy Bitcoin for a nickel, or you were, Luke Dasher writing code, like you weren't really adding all that much value to Bitcoin itself. And I didn't really fit either of those molds. Now I definitely see like a vision for like how, and maybe I was just dumb all those years, for not understanding that. But I really
bought some, so I don't think anyone can call you dumb. So yeah.
Sure. But I do regret sometimes that I wasn't able to get in earlier, because I think that if I had heard those words before, as like the product of money is financial services, that it would have been clearer to me earlier where I could add value. I'm very happy to be doing it now. I mean, yeah.
So you see Bitcoin, you saw it as this project with that was money, and you saw that the goal of money is financial services. So talk to me about like this transition from being at Stack Overflow and maybe even coming to Austin and seeing this community. What made you really get involved in the Bitcoin community? Why leave this incredible company with a lot of users and everything else that's going really well? Why come to Unchained Capital? What's the deal?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting journey for me because, call it 2018 or so, I joined the Wyoming Blockchain Task Force. And so their goal was to write legislation that would create a jurisdiction where Bitcoin companies and people, miners and everyone could have certainty around the law that their business wasn't going to be illegal tomorrow, right? We set up a chancery court, so I was involved in that. It was a legislative body. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard of this before, but it was a really cool structure because it was a legislative body with 3 citizens also appointed by the governor to oversee the legislation writing process. And I was like, oh wow, I found a way to provide value here. And really, oh gosh, I hate talking about myself this way, but it was kind of like an egotistical, process I went through where people would come up to me and they're like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you working in Bitcoin? I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know I don't know how to add value. And, but eventually I'd met some people, at different Bitcoin companies where I was convinced that like, okay, I actually do have a skill set that could be helpful here. And initially, I wasn't looking at Unchained. I knew the Unchained people, and I knew one of my best friends growing up was Parker Lewis, and he had joined here. But I was looking at bigger companies at the time. And then I think Parker took a little bit of offense to that. He's like, if you're going to work in Bitcoin, you're going to work here. And he wore me down. I met Drew and Joe, and no, they really sold me on the vision of what financial services, what Bitcoin native financial services were going to look like. And of course, I had the skill set to come and help this company. But I would say more than anything, it was connecting the dots of really defining what the product of money was. Right? What a software product of money was. And it's not just building a Bitcoin wallet. It's a necessary part of it, but it's, what do people do with money? They transact, but it's not just peer-to-peer transactions. It's inheritance, and it's lending, and it's trade execution is part of it. But, that was the only thing the exchanges were focused on for so long. It was just FX trades. It's like, what percentage of the, finance product world is FX trading? It's like, that's just a moment in time. Like a true vision of all the things that you'll need to be able to do under a Bitcoin standard. And Unchained was the only company that I found that could articulate that vision, and I was addicted to it.
So you get convinced to join Unchained, and you've joined. I don't know, what was it, like 2 years ago?
Yeah, about 2 years. It was like December of 2019.
Okay, and you've been part of this company for a few years now. You've obviously done a lot. Tell me more about this vision for Bitcoin in Austin, because we obviously are sitting in the Bitcoin Commons space, as you explained before. We have events going on during South by that are happening. How did that come about, and how does that fit into Unchained's vision? Why is it here, and what are you trying to do here?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much to unpack. I'll put it this way. I don't think it's a mistake that a company like Unchained would be started in Austin. There's a character to Austin that even before Unchained that attracted a lot of Bitcoiners. There were a lot of core developers here. You were here. My brother had moved here. I'd moved back here. What was going on at the University of Texas with the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute people, Michael, Pierre, Daniel, that crowd. There was a lot of groundwork that was laid over a long period of time in Austin that was building up Bitcoin talent here. So it's not a surprise that a great company would sprout out of that somewhere. And meeting Drew and Joe, who are the two founders of Unchained Capital, Drew, I know, knew some of these people when he was in college in the physics department, or I don't know what department he was in. I think physics at University of Texas. That Joe was here as well. That there was this sense that there was a brand of Bitcoin understanding that was emerging in Austin that I was participating in, but that was already here before I got here, right? And so there was a good foundation, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And from there, what do you need to do when you're creating a company? You need people to care. You need talent to draw from. It's not hard to convince people to move to Austin. We're also very remote friendly, but we like when people are here. We pretty shamelessly recruit people to live here, even if it means dragging your family across the entire United States. A lot of people have done that. Like
Marty,
yeah, like the podcast studio that we're in right now. What's the vision for that? Is that I was in New York for my first half of my Bitcoin life. Of understanding Bitcoin. And New York was a great place to understand Bitcoin because of the rest of the financial world going on around you. When you can look from your apartment and look at the New York Fed and think about, all the paper trucks of paper shredders out there and what are they shredding? What are they hiding from us? None of this makes sense. It puts you in a different mindset and can make you appreciate Bitcoin pretty early on. However, I would say there's a character of Austin that's very different. And I want to tell a little story about what I think was the tipping point, which was in 2020, everyone starts locking down. Economies are shut down, restaurants, no one's seeing each other in person. I mean, we see each other in person because we're not crazy, but but people aren't even seeing each other in person. And Gary, who runs BitBlock Boom, kept his conference in August of that year. And we all went, we had a great time. it was wonderful to see everyone again. And like, there were like there was a small group of like 6 or 7 of us that had been seeing each other that whole time, but we had 250 people there, and it was intoxicating. And when we returned from Dallas in August of 2020, Parker and I talked about it, and we're like, we have to get Bit Devs going again. We wanted to talk to Justin Moon, and like, we have to get together again. And there was we prioritized meet space, and knowing that that our physical proximity to each other mattered, and that great things happened when we got together. We felt better as people, but we could also accomplish more. We could, all those things. And so we started doing Bit Devs again. You were there, and many people would come. Justin was hosting it, and people started flying in from all over the country, sometimes overseas, month after month after month. We were the only place in the world where you could get together in person and see each other and touch each other and like have that moment together. Unchained hosting that was a risk, right? That they took reputationally. People showing up was a risk that they took, in uncertainty. But I think it resonated with people that like we took a risk and we valued getting each other together. So Justin doing that, Gary setting the sort of pattern for us to follow, and the courage that it took to do that was really important. And then it made us realize that, what we were doing here was not happening anywhere else. And that we had a responsibility that it was good for Bitcoin that we were doing this, right? Not trying to be too egotistical, but it was good for Bitcoin that we were doing this, and that more than anything, things that are good for Bitcoin, like we should be doing. So we just started building on that. And very soon, both our company and the community that was forming here in Austin outgrew our office, right? And we looked around. Joe and Parker and I spent a lot of time looking at different offices. Like I said at the beginning, we went through plenty of glass monstrosities and terrible fiat buildings, and we found this place. We wanted to get the entire floor, but it was very important to us that we were at least we would at least initiate a space for Bitcoiners that was not Unchained space. You can, if I'm pointing outside for everyone listening right now, but right outside of here is a, rather large, floor spanning room that we host Bit Devs in. But we wanted a space, we thought about what would be valuable to bring people together to do. It was the fraternity of things like, just getting together and having happy hours and stuff like that. It was education. So Bit Devs is an educational experience. Your classes, teaching other developers, bringing them into the Bitcoin world, right? The hackathons for PlebFi and those
Lightning Hackathon
this weekend. Having a place where we could get together and do that, we thought was good for Bitcoin. It's good for Unchained too, but like really it's more than that, because this isn't Unchained space. We have co-sponsors, NYDIG and Spiral and 1031 and list goes on, Casa, and tons and tons of companies here that are helping subsidize this space, not just Unchained. And what's really important about this space is that we get that venue where if you want to learn about Bitcoin, whether it's a highly technical thing or a more entry-level thing, that there's a venue for that. If you're starting a business and you need a space to work out of, right, that this can operate as your co-working space, that if you have a story to tell, right, and you want to reach an audience, that we have a professional, nice place to do that, right?
Beautiful.
Really, it was a space for Bitcoiners, right, where Bitcoin could be at the center of everything, right, and that our physical proximity to each other, our ability to meet up in person and value that time together, was in a beautiful space.
And it is a beautiful space, and so many events going on. It's funny because like we had to actually wait before this particular podcast because Marty was recording with Alex. Then right after us, I think Marty is recording with Pete and Christian, right? Like so, everything is just sort of like happening here. And of course, we got like a couple of guys behind the camera over here that are like helping us with recording that are from Pleb Lab. It's really become sort of like a community here, and it really does feel like there's momentum around this community. Where do you want it to go? Where do you see it going? What's your vision 5, 10 years from now? How is this going to sort of develop?
Yeah, so I think of this more as like an Austin community than a Bitcoin community. I want to be clear that I don't actually think there's a Bitcoin community. I don't think that actually exists, and it's global. But we tongue in cheek say Austin's the Bitcoin capital of the world, right? Right now, that's kind of true in the sense that like that's where Bitcoiners happen to be convening, right? Over the next 5 or 10 years, I hope people copy us, right? I hope the same thing exists in LA. I hope the same thing exists in Nashville. I hope the same thing exists in London, right? Because what I think is good for Bitcoin is that we are bringing together motivated, smart people where we're educating the next generation of Bitcoiners, where we're incubating the next generation of Bitcoin companies, right? And that does require a lot of coordination. That requires people getting together in person, whether it's for an educational purpose or a hackathon or something like that. And so what I hope is that we actually see something where this gets copied in dozens of places over a relatively short amount of time. Now, we'll still be the capital of the world here, and we did, take this to the next level. But at the same time, it's not gonna be unique just to us, right? And all the people that visit us from London and New York and Nashville all the time, they're gonna do this in their hometowns as well. That's what I hope happens.
Indeed. That's a compelling vision that I really hope other cities can do. So let's switch gears for a moment, because you are known also for having orange pilled your mother-in-law. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that was? Who is she and what happened?
It's weird to be known for who you got into Bitcoin more than yourself in Bitcoin. But yes, no, my mother-in-law is Cynthia Lummis. She's the U.S. Senator from Wyoming, and she's been on this podcast before. No, I mean, the story is really fun. I'd been in for a few years, and we spend Christmas in Wyoming every year. We go skiing and do all that fun stuff, be in the snow. And for a Christmas gift one year, I decided that I was going to get her Bitcoin.
What year was this, just roughly?
I can't remember, to be honest. I think it was 2013 or 2014. It's Christmas of one of those 2 years.
Very early, yeah.
It's either 2013 or 2014. And but actually, her story on this is pretty cool. Is that so she bought Bitcoin. She was a congressman at the time, then it just sort of sat there, right? And I think it was a year later I decided to teach her about self-custody. So I bought I think it was a Trezor at the time, and I was going to teach her how to take control over the Bitcoin. And so we go into her exchange account to get the Bitcoin out and put it on the Trezor, and she's locked out. And it wasn't like a problem with 2FA or a password reset or anything like that. It was that this exchange in particular had taken the view that their money transmitter license was not valid in the state of Wyoming.
Oh, no.
And instead of just letting people in Wyoming like take their coins and go do whatever, they just locked people's accounts for 3 years. Force hodling. Yeah. So she learned a lot of lessons there about Bitcoin without actually having access to her initial, Bitcoin purchase. And it was actually the Wyoming Blockchain Task Force that changed the money transmission laws. It wasn't for those purposes, of course, that ended up unlocking the Bitcoin from all the exchanges that the Wyoming citizens were on. But no, I mean, to her credit, I mean, she tells her story really well, is that, Cynthia, she was already a proponent for freedom in the world. She already had a libertarian streak to her conservative, worldview. She had been the U.S. Treasurer. She'd been the Treasurer of Wyoming prior to that. She had a sophisticated knowledge of how what money was and what gave value to money. And so for orange pilling her was really just sort of a quick thing. She got it really fast. Yeah. It also helped that, my wife, her daughter, Annalise, was already pretty deep as well in the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of your wife, that was, I did not expect to be working with her on a book before I worked on a book with you. But yeah, she helped write this book over here, Bitcoin and the American Dream. What's the story between you two and how you got her orange pilled as well? So like what happened there? Was it just because you were dating and she was interested, or was it more than that?
It was competition more than anything. She saw what I was doing. She's like, he can't possibly do better than I do in life. And so we were competitively stacking before we were married.
Wow.
And she caught up pretty fast. No, I mean, like, she's an excellent writer. Again, like, she had a great education. She had been exposed. She had a deep understanding of money, conservative values that could map very well to an understanding of Bitcoin, an understanding of economics, and at least people around her that could lend credibility to the technical benefits of Bitcoin. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, she fell before her mom down this rabbit hole, and was definitely a huge part of getting our first U.S. senator backing Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I'm sure you're a good writer, but Annalise is pretty awesome.
Oh, I'm not even close. Yeah. Well, she's like, she went to Columbia Journalism School. Like, she really knows her stuff.
You married pretty well. You married pretty well.
So I'm told all the time.
Yeah. So, we're at Unchained. We're within the same floor as Unchained anyway. Tell me a little bit more about, like, sort of where the company is going and what you're looking to do there, because you've obviously joined. You have this vision for, I guess, financial services around Bitcoin. What are some things that are coming up that you can share with us as a company?
Sure. So yeah, right now, I really look at it as like the big three in financial services. The first thing we ever did at Unchained was lending, but we built a custody model around lending. I say we. This is before I got here. This is Joe and Drew, first starting out. Is that when they built the one of the first ever Bitcoin-backed lending protocols out there, is they did things differently than the other first startups, right? Who outsourced custody to third parties and really were just sort of, sales and marketing veneers on top of someone else's tech. Like, Drew built a multi-sig setup for custodying collateral that was pretty narrow in the sense that, like, this was a Bitcoin wallet meant for collateral, right? So it wasn't super flexible or anything like that, but it did its job well. And they coined the term collaborative custody, this idea that even in loan collateral, you could eliminate single points of failure, right? You could share private key ownership with the borrower, the lender, and with another third party to create this sort of Bitcoin native way of doing a loan. That collaborative custody idea transformed into a product of its own, of a custody arrangement for anyone, for unencumbered Bitcoin, right? Where a typical collaborative custody arrangement is where our customer, our client, has two keys and we have one in a 2 of 3 setup. So they are sovereign over their Bitcoin, but there's some backup there, right? Or they can even use us as an operational signer every day. And so there's a few things like these pillars, this idea of in financial services is like, if you can custody in a trusted manner, in a transparently good manner, if you can lend, and if you can do trade execution, like you can swap Bitcoin for dollars and vice versa, that you kind of have the pillars in which to build any combination of financial services. If you can do those 3 things, you can do everything in financial services. And what we've spent our time doing so far is really solidifying those 3 pillars, right? And so what's coming up soon is we're expanding our trade execution availability to anyone in our application. Right now, we operate mostly as an OTC desk. You call a trader up on the phone, you execute your trades. They're OTC sized as well. So we'll start going down market a little bit and you'll be able to do it through the application. But we'll also start getting, these leveraged benefits from having all 3 of these on really solid footing. Having having your cold storage collaborative custody wallet set up makes it better for you to buy Bitcoin, because you buy Bitcoin directly into cold storage with keys that you control. You're limiting your counterparty risk, and you're taking the most direct way of complete ownership over your Bitcoin. If you have trading and you have lending, right? And something bad happens, Bitcoin's price cuts in half and you have margin call responsibilities. The ability to buy Bitcoin to add more collateral or to sell Bitcoin to pay down principal, and that trade execution part makes the lending product better, right? If the reason you are taking out a loan is to buy more Bitcoin and you have all these financial services, sort of stacked on each other, then of course that's just buying Bitcoin with Bitcoin, right? And so we get to do all these things and expand our financial service offerings. An IRA that we're doing, we partnered and ended up buying Keykeeper, Jeff Andrews' company, to do IRA. I mean, it's a legal structure on top of a vault, on top of a custody arrangement, right? And so again, like, those pillars allow you to expand into pretty much any form of financial service that you can imagine. And our job at Unchained, our vision of it at Unchained, is what we call Bitcoin native financial services, is to constrain ourselves to the solutions that keep our customers as close to the protocol as possible, right? So we're not doing a custody arrangement with Shamir secret sharing or MPC. No, it's Bitcoin's multisig, right? And those lack the lack of abstraction there can be challenging from a UX perspective, but at the end of the day, we want our customers to truly benefit from the unique properties of Bitcoin, and that's what sort of guides us. Those are the guardrails in which we operate.
Well, that sounds great. One last thing, sort of, that we need to cover. Of course, you were the guy that told me when Bitcoin hits 10,000, we have to go get hats, and this hat, this wonderful hat, is a result of that. It cost me $900.
Sorry,
I didn't realize that it would cost that much. What are we gonna do when Bitcoin hits 50,000? What's the deal here?
Letty's boots in Fort Worth. So it hit 50,000, and then we didn't lock in the boots, which cursed us, and we went below again. But our $10,000 hats are going to turn into our $50,000 boots. I don't know where we're going to. Really, what we should be asking ourselves is, where are we going to do at 100,000? Because that's going to be a special moment.
Yeah, that is going to be a special moment, and we're going to have to come up with something other than boots.
Do we just buy tanks, or is it guns, or what do we do for?
Well, how much am I going to spend on the boots? That's the thing.
It's hat money.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's not terrible. It's especially with inflation.
Yeah, for special occasions.
All right, so where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Oh yeah, so I'm at Will Cole on Twitter. Definitely the best place to find me. I don't really go anywhere else. I'm not on Facebook or anything.
Well, I mean, you're at Unchained, so you can at least promote
Unchained.
that website.
Yes, Unchained. I'm so bad at this. Unchained.com, where you can sign up for the custody product for free, or you can go through our concierge onboarding process, which you'll get handheld by experts on how to get set up with the hardware wallets and multi-sig, IRAs, all that fun stuff. And so Unchained.com and at Will Cole on Twitter.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy.
All right. There we go.